Welcome back, everybody. Draskyl here with another replay analysis regarding the counters and more specifically the lane counter series. Now, it's quite difficult to go over every single lane counter in Dota because there's a lot of heroes and there's a lot of matchups, a lot of stuff to know. But what I want to try to do with this particular video is give you guys some ideas that you can try in your own game whenever you're playing against a matchup that you know as yourself to be difficult for you. So in this game, we're going to be watching the perspective of a Wind Ranger. This is Gunnar. For those of you guys who don't know, he's a very high MMR and a mid player, very good. And he's going to be playing against a Kunkka. Now, this matchup, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is more or less favored for Kunkka, I'd say almost 100% of the time. And not only just in the lane, but as the game goes on and on, it actually gets more difficult for Wind Ranger because her main mode of staying alive is by pushing Wind Run and being able to deal damage and crowd control from a distance. So Kunkka can just X-mark you, hit you with 2 different stuns that are all magical damage, plus Tidebringer, if you're not the primary target, doesn't care about evasion, so you can't miss. As long as you hit a target with a Tidebringer and the Wind Ranger is in the vicinity of that, she takes damage. Now, this is especially true for the laning phase because Wind Ranger has a very, very low starting armor. 2 starting armor for any hero is pretty bad, but when you're against Kunkka, it's really, really bad. Because again, this is harass that doesn't cost him any mana. Just over time, you're going to take more and more damage. So obviously, this is the mid lane. We're going to be talking about a couple of concepts that he employs in his game to ensure that the lane doesn't go too terribly. And more or less just try to get whatever you can out of the lane. And in addition, we're going to talk about the other stuff that could happen or the other stuff that maybe you could think about doing in your own game if you have a situation like this, or maybe you play this exact matchup sometime in the future. Both these heroes are pretty common, so it's very possible. We're going to go ahead and hit play. The first thing that we're going to talk about is his items. So we're in a game where we know that we're walking to a lane with a guy who's going to harass us with physical damage. And because he's going to do a majority of his damage through Tidebringer to us, he comes to lane with Ring of Protection. Now, Ring of Protection doubles our starting armor. Not only does it double our starting armor, but we are currently standing in range of the tower aura. So instead of having 2 armor, we actually have 7. And the difference in physical damage taken just by having these things is massive. So whenever he gets hit like that, imagine if you just had 5 less armor, he'd probably be at around 20% health already. The other thing that you'll notice, the way that he's playing the lane, he's pulling the creeps back to his side of the river. He's always autoing the Kunkka when the opportunity arises, and pulling the creeps back allows us to maintain the tower aura for basically as long as we can have it on, we want it on. The third thing is that he comes to lane with 3 branches. He starts with 3 branches specifically, at least this is what I think. I think he starts with these branches because he knows that he's going to be taking a ton of physical damage harass, and since his inventory is pretty low starting cost, he's going to get to bottle before 2 minutes. So he has planned out, or maybe he just knows this matchup well enough through experience to deduce, hey, I need armor. I'm going to need to go for a bottle rush. If I have branches, then I know that I can plant these to get double use of my tango to bridge the gap between me having to buy more regen and then also me getting the bottle on time so that when I do have it, as you'll notice the 2-minute rune spawning right now, he gets the rune and now he's still full health, still full mana, and level 3. So if we were to pause right now at 2 minutes, there are players who would already have lost this matchup. They would have already kind of collapsed to the harass that the Kunkka was throwing on by either coming to lane with the wrong items or not pushing the wave or having a bottle being sent out at the right time. Or any number of things could have possibly gone wrong. Maybe you try to over-harass, you take too much creep damage, then you have to ferry out a salve. It's really important to remember that when you're in these countered matchups that you don't overreact to certain things. So in this case, he buys the Ring of Protection, he buys 1 set of tangos, he buys 3 branches and a Fairy Fire. That's it. He didn't come to lane with like 2 or 3 salves. He's probably played the matchup a handful of times and has a good understanding of how much damage he's going to be taking based on level through whatever Tidebringer harass comes his way. And now, since he's already made it to this point, the matchup is playing pretty well for the first couple levels. This doesn't get easier for him, it actually gets more difficult. The reason it gets more difficult is because Tidebringer cooldown gets lower, and the amount of damage that you get per Tidebringer gets higher as well. So this lane actually becomes exceedingly more difficult the longer it goes until level 7, level 8, level 9, when Kunkka starts getting additional points into X mark. Then the lane becomes ultra dangerous, because then other heroes can rotate to you and you can just die. So he's got his water rune here. He's still more or less just hitting the Kunkka whenever he has the opportunity. He also throws out some auto attacks on creeps here and there. And he's even content to pull the wave under tower. This is also another tactic that you can employ in the mid lane. When you want the lane to push out, pulling the wave into your tower while you have a range creep alive will make it so the creeps are getting hit by the tower, and then your range creep can still stay alive. And Kunkka is obviously the type of hero that's going to push the lane very, very heavily, especially when he's harassing. And since mid lane is so much about the lane equilibrium, who has the bigger creep wave, who can apply damage, it's a really nice technique to have when you're playing against a guy who's going to just shove the wave all the time, that you can pull those creeps in before your whole wave's dead. That way it sort of equalizes. And he's also getting some really nice setup for his power shots. He gets basically every creep there. And at level 4, 3 minutes into the game, he's feeling pretty good. So the next thing he does is he buys a chainmail. Any safe laner who's played heroes like Wraith King or Lifestealer, sometimes even Jug, is going to be pretty familiar with this sort of item build. We are going to see an attempted gank here. The Techies comes in. Unfortunately, the Shackle Shot did not latch, and it's going to end up costing him his life. So, a little bit of a failed gank, but that's okay. The main premise of this video is not about the execution of ganks. It's more about the ideas behind the concepts that he's applying to prevent himself from getting overwhelmed by like physical damage, harass, and all this other stuff. So, the next item in line is Chainmail. You'll notice that he has Phase Boots and he has Soul Ring on his quick buy. So he has not purchased either of these items without the intent to go one step further and turn them into something else. There will be times in Dota where the beginning of the game it is okay to buy a small item that you don't plan on turning into something. But it's also nice when that small item does turn into something that you do want. So in this case, Soul Ring gives him more HP, which protects from the burst. It's built from the Ring of Protection, which he needed in the lane to survive the Tidebringer and such. And then he's also got Chainmail, which serves the same purpose as having the Ring of Protection, but he knows that the damage is going to get higher and higher. So he needs additional armor in the form of an item that he would need to purchase anyway to make sure that he's not dying in the lane. Now, if we were to watch this as the player and just be like, okay, that gank was just kind of unfortunate. If that didn't happen, this lane would still be going very well. So let's just say the Techies rotation, you know, the execution wasn't perfect, but if the Kunkka dies instead of the Wind Ranger, this lane is already feeling really good in a matchup that is not supposedly favored for the Wind Ranger. So let's go ahead and fast forward through the death here. The unfortunate part about this death is it does put him in a situation where he can only get one rune. Like, he can't deny the Kunkka the other one, so he's going to get one water rune, and then Kunkka is going to get his own. But even at this stage, 21-4 for the Kunkka, 21-2 for the Wind Ranger. These are the types of things that you can apply in any lane in terms of itemization, but this one is especially unique for middle because you don't often see heroes buying like the Ring of Protection start and turning it into something like a Soul Ring, even though it does make a lot of sense in this game. So he's trying to get some damage here on the Kunkka. Notices he's under tower without a creep wave. Even though he's in I would say a disfavored position, he's always trying to get some form of harass off and set up to make the Kunkka feel a little bit less comfortable inside of the lane. Now, if you're not familiar enough in your matchup to play as aggressive as he's playing, that's fine too, but you will have to eventually learn the matchup by trying to go for kills, by trying to apply pressure, and learn your own limitations. So that's also part of what we will loosely refer to here as matchup knowledge. Now, this Shackle is actually potentially a setup for a kill. So he has the high ground ward on the Kunkka side, and he sees the X mark TP. This is very common for Kunkka players to do. They will X mark themselves, they will TP back to base to fill the bottle, and then they'll come back to lane with full health and mana. By stopping this a single time, he has now set up a kill on the Kunkka for the next 60 seconds, unless the Kunkka immediately walks back to base. So really what the Shackle implication here is, allows for the Wind Ranger to continually apply pressure if she wants, or if anyone is capable of TPing to the lane, which right now, based on health and mana values on Radiant, I'd say it's pretty unlikely. It makes the Kunkka feel a lot less comfortable occupying this space. Because now, he is sitting at 40% health, and if some hero with a stun were to come here, or a techie is to come out of the trees with a suicide or something like that, it is very, very high risk for this hero. So these are opportunities that you can open up for yourself based on gameplay, not just itemization. But these are like tactics that, if you understand what the other hero wants out of the lane, you can do little stuff like this that doesn't seem like much at first, but it ends up being a huge problem. Because instead of being a hero with, let's check Kunkka's health values, it's probably around 1100. Yep, he's 1120. Now, instead of having this full health bar, we have no TP, we have 400 health, and we do have enough mana to cast our spells. But obviously, if you're in his shoes right now, you're feeling a lot less confident in being here. So we'll see what happens after the fact. It looks like Radiant's trying to gank bottom right now, which is fine. Another Tidebringer comes out. And that damage is always going to be there. The Tidebringer harass is always going to be there, but he takes so much less damage having these items. Those two Tidebringers without a chainmail probably would have just straight up killed him under tower. So unfortunately, the Shackle stopping the X mark didn't really result in a kill, but it very easily could have, and that's how you should always be thinking about it. It's not about necessarily what happens after you make the move. It's the idea of the move can be correct on its own, but it just sometimes doesn't work out that way. Doing the correct thing over the course of X amount of games should usually net you a win in some capacity. So the Kunkka picks up a DD rune. He ended up getting forced back, even though he gets the Shackle to cancel the TP, which is a little bit unfortunate for him. And now this situation is really bad. So let's talk about what happens here in the past 10 seconds that we could have avoided if we were paying enough attention, right? So obviously there are some heroes off the map right now, notably the Lion and the Phoenix. And we saw the Kunkka pop to DD before he hit the wave. So when Kunkka gets level 7, he has his lowest Tidebringer cooldown, and he's going to basically delete your wave in 2 autos. He's going to Tidebringer once, it's going to kill the range creep as long as he has phase boots, and then he's going to Tidebringer again, and it's going to kill the rest of them. So the problem here is that he's still visible when his wave dies. This is something that is applicable in any Kunkka matchup. If the Kunkka kills you by pushing X, and you're visible after your wave gets deleted, you are probably dead. So we could just say here that he was out of position, right? He needed to be standing further back. His power shot was up in 2 seconds. Like right here, he's safe. And he's safe because even when the creeps walk up the hill, the creeps will not see him. If he keeps walking backwards, he will live. But you'll notice that he's kind of like walking back and forth. And right here, he's already... If he gets X right now and there's any hero in this area, he dies. Alright, so there is a Lion. He actually missed the X mark combo because of the Shackle timing. So he did a... We'll call it an ability outplay. So let's watch so we can see it again. We'll put it at half speed. Actually, this is too far back. Alright, here we go. So, again, because he's played this matchup a lot, he probably recognizes that this is a situation that is not favorable to him. So what would happen to a lot of players is once this happens, they would panic, and as soon as they got X'd, they would probably randomly throw their shackle, and it would result in their death. So what happens here is the X mark comes, and then we're waiting. We see the torrent. We know that he didn't fake it, right? And because we know that he didn't fake it, we can cancel his animation, and we can prevent the X from pulling us back in time for the torrent to hit. So he actually rushed. So here's what happened. The Kunkka rushed his X mark pullback because he was worried about getting canceled and actually made him miss. So it's not even that the shackle stopped the animation. It was that he timed it in a way where the Kunkka felt like he was unsure if it was going to hit or not, and that forced him to use the ability preemptively, and then he missed anyway. Pretty cool play. Pretty cool play. It's stuff like that that you won't notice unless you like go through the replay and you actually watch the abilities being used and like think about it in terms of what Kunkka needs to happen. You could also look at it from the other side and just say, you know, just go for the timing, and if it misses, it misses. And the Lion also probably could have been standing closer.
It looks like they're going after Dire's middle tower.
I would say there, it is probably more on the Kunkka than it is on the Wind Ranger making like a good play. But the attempt and the thought is still there to try to interrupt the combo. And we could still very easily just say, yeah, probably shouldn't have been that far up. So if you're looking at this retroactively and trying to learn from it, what we would just say as the Wind Ranger is maybe just don't stand there. That's the easiest solve. It's the easiest solve that doesn't make us have to do some crazy play in order for us to not die. And it also takes the control out of the Kunkka's hands. Because if we're just standing further back, we can never be X'd, and then we never have to be in a situation where we have to use our shackle like that to save our life.
The good news is that radiant structures will be much harder to damage now.
Alright, so it's about 8 minutes in now. CS-wise, the Kunkka's pulling ahead, but again, that's no surprise. Kunkka is one of the fastest creep-hitting heroes in the entire game. And if you're torrent stacking, which is still very doable, then you can just get an insane amount of money very, very quickly. But he's still being very efficient with his time. He's going to stack while going for the rune. The rune's going to spawn bottom, unfortunately for him, so he won't get it. But every play so far that has been made, barring the little mid snafu where the techies tried to gank and he ended up dying, there's sound logic behind everything. Even him not rotating makes sense. And I can explain in a little bit more detail what I mean by that. So you're in a game, and you have a techies and an axe on one side of the map. You're laning against a hard counter, which is Kunkka, who does a lot of physical damage, so you need to itemize in a way that's not necessarily going to give you the most bang for your buck on abilities like Focus Fire. Then, on the Dire off lane, you have a Timber Saw. So if you go to bottom and you try to Focus Fire a Timber and you don't even have a Javelin in your inventory, the odds of that gank working out are basically 0. Because your Focus Fire gets a damage penalty regardless, and the main method of dealing damage through Focus Fire is the Javelin or a Maelstrom or an MKB or whichever item you choose to get. So if he goes bottom, chances are he's probably not going to kill. If he goes top, he could maybe kill, but a Kunkka TP is a really scary thing to have to deal with. As we just saw right there, somebody gets X-marked, they get torrented, they kind of just die. So there's a tanky core in the safe lane, and there's a tanky core in the off lane, and there's a tanky core in the mid lane. Rotating anywhere just doesn't feel natural for this hero in this game, because all your damage is physical. Both cores you're ganking have high armor values, high regen values, they're near towers, and the enemy mid has high catch. We're talking like puck levels of catch. So if I make a rotation and I didn't see something happen on the map beforehand, there is a super high likelihood that it will fail, and it will result in me also dying. So him not leaving the mid lane for 9 minutes to the player who might be a bit newer to the game seems odd. But the mid player is not always the one who is responsible for the tempo of the game, and in some cases your mid player might not really be able to do that much without help. So this is an example of a player who is pretty much doing the best with what we would call a bad situation. Wind Ranger is not particularly strong against really anything that Dire has currently, but we're making do by having a pretty consistent level of farm, our levels are looking pretty decent. And even though the Kunk is the highest net worth, this is expected. This is a video that is purely about the counter matchup and what can be done to prevent this, or to prevent the situation from escalating out of control. So we've gone about 10 minutes into the replay, and we can recap a few things, also add a little bit more information on the end here. Everything that he did in this game had a reason behind it. Buys armor for the harass, buys regen to bridge the gap between bottle, uses power shot spam to push out the wave so we don't get harassed on our tower, stacks whenever he has the opportunity. He's always trying to harass. He cancels the Kunkka TP with a shackle. He does get slightly out of position, but he manages to salvage it by good skill usage. And we had one kind of bad thing that happened, which was dying in the mid lane because of the Techie's gank. Now, it wasn't necessarily the Techie's fault, but it was the thing that happened in the game. But all things considered, 4K net worth at 10, you will definitely see many mid players have much less than this in this matchup as the Wind Ranger. A lot less. And as we mentioned, he did have the death. So without that, if the Kunkka dies instead, if the Shackle lands, we could be seeing a completely different lane dynamic. Because once the Kunkka dies, and he's not in the lane and that tower gets pressured, maybe it forces a TP, and then you have all this like butterfly effect things that go on. But the main points of this video, hopefully that you guys got, are this. When you're walking to a lane where you know the hero counters you, have a plan. Figure out what it is that they do to you that is going to cause you problems, and try to solve it either through items, through rotations. Maybe you can stack camps for yourself. Maybe you can, get a rune or ask your supports to come to a rune to take that rune away from the enemy mid so he can't use it. There are a ton of things that can be accomplished in Dota by just having a little bit of forethought. And I would say, as far as counters go, this one seemed pretty mild to me after having watched everything play out in real time. But don't forget, it's not always okay to just sit in your lane for 10 minutes as the mid player. This game is a very specific case because the side lane heroes, the Spectre and the Timber, are notoriously hard to kill for a Wind Ranger with this level of farm and no real damage item yet. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a little something, at the very least, about this matchup. If you guys want to catch me live, you can do so on twitch.tv/Draskyl, same as the YouTube video. Hope you guys are all doing great, and we'll see you very, very soon.